The history of the African American civil rights movement can be traced to the closing days of the Civil War. Between 1865 and 1870, Amendments 13, 14, and 15, otherwise known as the Reconstruction Amendments, sought to give equal rights to African Americans. The 13th Amendment was adopted in 1865, effectively abolishing slavery. Nearly 3 years later, the 14th Amendment made African Americans citizens of the United States. The 15th Amendment in 1870 gave African American males the right to vote. However, they would not be able to freely exercise this right until 1965 after President Lyndon B. Johnson signed the Voting Rights Act. This act barred states from adopting further legislation that would contradict the 15th Amendment. Even though these amendments were adopted by Congress, they were bitterly contested, particularly in the southern states. It was during these times that the African American civil rights movement as we know it was born. More than 100 years later, civil rights leaders were still fighting to enforce the rights African Americans were entitled to according to the U.S. Constitution. Irene Morgan in 1944 was arrested for refusing to sit in a segregated area on an interstate Greyhound bus, but it was Rosa Parks in late 1955 who sparked a wave of civil disobedience in the African American community, igniting the civil rights movement as we know it today. In Montgomery, Alabama, Parks refused the orders of a bus driver who demanded she give up her seat to a white passenger. African American civil rights leaders soon emerged, such as Daisy Bates, who was a mentor to the Little Rock Nine, a group of African American students who integrated into an all-white school in Little Rock, Arkansas. Leaders like Malcolm X later came to represent much of the anger and frustration many African Americans felt. Contrary to Malcolm X's sometimes angry and fiery speeches, leaders like Andrew Young, Ralph Abernathy, Jesse Jackson, and Martin Luther King Jr. spoke of equality by uniting people of all races, giving the civil rights movement more universal appeal and much-needed momentum. Today, African Americans have a proud history of military and civic service. The African American civil rights movement has allowed the U.S. military to integrate and utilize the talents of people of all races, strengthening not only the military itself, but our entire nation.
The civil rights movement was very important. It fought against segregation and discrimination. The civil rights movement was also important. It helped pass laws to give Black Americans the right to vote and be treated equal as American citizens. You know, it's a great opportunity to be able to watch the hard work, dedication that Martin Luther King and many others made to change this world and this country. Changes I'm talking about, that our kids of all race be able to go to the same school and learn together. To see Black Americans holding high-ranking position in this wonderful military, and also to witness the first Black president of the United States.
The civil rights has been a big impact on my life, being a single parent, because back then, a single parent of color, the opportunities that I have now as far as raising my daughter in the society that we're living in, I wouldn't be able to do it back then. These heroes impacted a lot they not only paved the way for me, but they're actually paving the way for my daughter, so that as she's growing up, she will see the struggles that her mom went through, but it wouldn't be as hard for her to maneuver in the society that we're living in, and that she will appreciate even more what I instilled in her from her years to come.
The civil rights movement has improved the military greatly. Take a look at our formations. You're seeing people of all genders, races, helping each other not only come up through the military as people, but helping each other throughout life. That's helping not only the military, but it's also helping the greater good of the civilian world as well.
The civil rights movement started before slavery was abolished. It started with Harriet Tubman, one woman who had the desire to have freedom and the desire to move others to freedom underground. And she stood out because she really had a desire and a hunger for freedom. And she didn't want to keep that alone, even though she could have taken her own freedom and stayed there. She brought others out. Civil rights movement, it's not yet over. We still have a long way to go. And as Martin Luther King said, to hold hands and say someday we'll all reign in freedom together as one nation.
We'll be able to join hands and sing in the words of the old Negro spiritual, free at last, free at last. Thank God Almighty, we are free at last.